I see a lot of people out there commending Diaz for fighting Leon Edwards at this point in his career because of how dangerous of a fight Edwards is for him. Despite coming off of a long layoff before his last fight, Edwards showed up against Belal Muhammad and looked as sharp and as relaxed as we've ever seen him. So I completely agree with the sentiment from people out there saying that Diaz is taking a far more dangerous fight than he has to. And I was really unsure on this being the best call for Diaz based off of how he looked in the fight against Jorge Masvidal. He was generally pretty inactive in that fight, and he really didn't look like himself in there. I'm not prepared to write Diaz off and think he's over the hill just because he didn't look great in that fight. For all we know, he could have been dealing with an injury of some sort. God knows if he was injured, he sure as hell wouldn't be complaining to the fans or media in the aftermath. But I will say that if the Diaz we saw in the fight against Masvidal shows up against the Edwards we saw in Edwards' last fight against Muhammad, it's hard to imagine it not going Edwards' way. A slick technical kickboxer like Edwards is going to land on Diaz, and although we know Diaz can take it, you cannot afford to absorb too much from Edwards for too long. His style just wears on opponents and breaks them down as the fight progresses. So when I look at the betting odds and see how much they favor Edwards, I totally understand. As beautiful as Diaz's boxing is to watch when he gets in that groove and finds his rhythm, he sometimes needs to take some damage in order to dish it out, and you just cannot afford to take too much from Edwards. However, that's assuming that Diaz goes in there and stands up to trade with Edwards, which is the first place my mind goes to when I think of either Diaz brothers. When I think about the prospect of them fighting anybody, I always imagine them standing in their patented stance, taunting while walking forward and launching those pitter-patter shots just when the time is right. Despite being a jiu-jitsu-based fighter, oftentimes with a glaring advantage in the grappling realm over his opponents, Nate is always looking to go out there and engage in a straight-up fist fight. He hardly ever shows any interest in employing his submission game. But I believe this fight's going to be different. For some reason, I envision Diaz coming into this fight with full intention on utilizing his jiu-jitsu on Edwards. I do think that Diaz believes Edwards to be incredibly dangerous and recognize him as what he is, which is one of the best welterweights on the planet right now. I also believe that the very fact that Diaz is even agreeing to fight Edwards speaks volumes about his respect for Edwards as a fighter. However, I also believe that Diaz sees a hole in Edwards' game that he feels reasonably confident he can exploit. I personally think it's in the grappling realm. I do believe that Diaz is going to absolutely stand and trade with Edwards for a bit, but ultimately take us all by surprise by using his jiu-jitsu to get the victory. I also think that Diaz fully realizes that a win over Edwards would probably do more for his career than a win over just about anybody else at this juncture. Edwards is widely considered to be a viable contender for the title that's just been flying under the radar for an impossibly long time. A victory over a highly respected upper echelon welterweight considered to be in his prime is the biggest win Diaz could get right now. I think he sees a way to beat Edwards and sees this as an opportunity to set himself up for the future. Of course, this is just pure speculation. What the hell do I know? One thing I do know is that the Edwards Diaz is facing is probably going to be the best Edwards we've ever seen. He's a very focused fighter at the best of times, but after having so many big opportunities slip through his fingers, now, finally here on Fight Week with a firm grip on the biggest fight of his life by far, the very opportunity he's been waiting for all these years, you know he's going to show up ready and be as dangerous as he's ever been. So no matter what the result is, Diaz versus Edwards is going to give the fans what they've come to see. Diaz is never in a boring fight, and not only that, he comes with this aura that's unlike when any other fighter is competing, other than his big brother Nick, of course. I do think Diaz sees something in Edwards he can exploit. But even if that is the case, that doesn't mean that he's going to be able to implement that plan. From a betting standpoint, the optics heavily favor Edwards. Finally getting in the biggest fight of his career is going to bring out the absolute best in him. But despite the fact we're in the latter stages of Nate Diaz's career, he still has some magic left. And it only takes one good performance to completely alter the narrative on a fighter overnight, especially a fighter like Diaz. 1 minute it could seem like the end, the next thing you know it and he's back in the title picture. Diaz knowing something we don't and pulling off a surprise victory and the odds are stacked against him is something he's very familiar with. It's not just something he's very familiar with, it's something he has full intentions on doing again at UFC 263.